talk.
I'll second that, and that's the reason, he explained the reasons why it's why. I'll second.
Moved by Clyde, second by Mike. Any discussion on this item?
Yeah, here, thank you. I thought I would talk that you all to be.
He corrected the application.
Okay, well, include all messy comments and very.
That was a concern.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carries. Moves us to item 8, new business. First item being item 8, receive the report on status of cooperative plan with the town of Bristol and to consider adopting of the plan. Mike?
President tonight, Kevin Long, our counsel from Quarles and Brady is here to go through the reports, his report on our status for the cooperative plan and for the consideration we have on adopting that or taking that step. So that's Kevin.
Sure.
Proceed.
Thank you. You should have in your packets 3 documents, and I'll explain what those are, and we'll sort of drive the conversation. The first document, and some of this, all of this in fact, follows up on the public work meeting that we held on February 14th to discuss the cooperative plan. At that time, the first document here that says on it dated 2007 was addressed in that meeting, and we made certain changes to that document based on comments of the council, questions of the board, questions of the board. The document that says 2008 has different language in it based on those revisions. And then there's a red line version that you have in your packets as well. What occurred here is that coming out of a number of issues were raised at the work meeting by various board members, and the thought was, okay, my direction at that meeting was go talk to the representatives from Bristol, talk to staff, flesh out these issues, and come back to the board with an actionable or motionable status. And tonight what we have is 2 different versions of the agreement, and you have red line showing the changes. The first version of the agreement is the version that is in substantially the form that was passed by the town of Bristol. We'll call some background on this. The town of Bristol and the village of Pleasant Prairie had a number of disputes, primarily involving borders, but also involving other issues throughout the 1990s. In 1997, a document entitled, an agreement entitled the 1997 Settlement and Cooperation Agreement by and between the village of Pleasant Prairie, the Pleasant Prairie Water Utility, Pleasant Prairie Sewer Utility Districts, and the town of Bristol and the town of Bristol Utility Districts and Water Utility Districts was entered into. That document contemplated a cooperative plan under a particular Wisconsin statute, 66.0307, be negotiated between the parties, and that process has gone on throughout that time. In September of 2007, a public meeting pursuant to that agreement was held, and how the statute works here is that they say that the 2 municipalities should come to a general agreement, and then they should hold a public meeting. And the public meeting is for the purpose of allowing citizens to comment and to give citizens input into the plan, into that agreement. That meeting was held on September 6, 2007. The statute then says that from that date forward, it gives you a certain time period in which for each board to finalize and approve a version. After that agreement, council for the town and myself as council for the village negotiated some terms of the agreement based on comments that were made at the public meeting and other issues. Most of it was candidly fly-specking and making sure that this agreement, which is really not much more than a codification of the 1997 agreement, which remains in place, was done correctly. The town of Bristol, I don't know the date, but sometime between October 1, 2007, the end of this year, they did pass a version that is substantially similar to this 2007 version. Because of other pressing business of the board, this board hadn't had the opportunity prior to February 14th to really get into detail of what are the provisions of this agreement, how is it different than 1997, and more importantly, how are the facts and circumstances and challenges that face the village perhaps different now than they were in 1997. And as part of that, we noted that there were some provisions in this proposed cooperative plan, as passed in good faith by the town of Bristol, that perhaps ought to be looked at again. And that was the source of the revisions. After the meeting, I met with Mr. Polikoff as well as Gene Werby, as well as meeting with council for Bristol and working through some of those issues. I think an appropriate way to deal with all these topics is to just highlight the differences between the two and then take any questions you have. I think where this logically goes is that the board will have one of, I think, 4 options. One option would be they could pass the cooperative plan in substantially the form that the town of Bristol passed it. Another option the board has is to pass the plan as amended since that. It has the changes that we'll discuss in a few minutes. A third option is to indicate that we still are very much interested in negotiating and passing a cooperative plan with the town of Bristol, but we think there's additional work needs to be done in order for the 2 sides to come to an agreement. And the fourth option would be, well, we looked at that and we don't believe it's in our interest to pursue a cooperative plan. That would, I suppose, be a fourth option that the board could take. In looking at those options, there's one statutory issue that needs to come that you should bear in mind. And that's that if the board were to decide not to pass a cooperative plan, both boards, the town board and the village board, didn't pass a plan by March 6th, I think it is, there would be a requirement that the board hold another public meeting, that both boards come together and jointly hold another public meeting, give the public more information about the cooperative plan and opportunity for input. That opportunity and input, like many things here, is both people can come in person and they can submit written comments. I think if you take the red line version first, that would probably give you the best source of reference to the changes. The first change actually doesn't come until you get to section 5. That is in approximately the 6th page. Yes, the 6th page. And that had to do with, at various times in the cooperative agreement, is referred to as the word permanent is referred to, and at other times the word long-term is referred to. The issue was raised in a work meeting that there was a whereas clause in the beginning of the document that referred to a permanent boundary, and then there were other references that referred to long-term. In fact, both of those are somewhat accurate. The permanent reference in the whereas clause referred back to the 97 agreement that does use that term, and therefore that is accurate. With respect to section 5, the Department of Administration has indicated that you need to have some sort of a term, a finite number, and the 30-year period is the period that has been proposed. And we just made an amendment there to just say that the term of the cooperative plan and the term of the boundary adjustment period shall be 30 years. What boundary adjustment period means is the period in which that boundary might be adjusted. You recall that in this case, in 1997, all those boundary adjustments have already been made. In 97, there was an area called the village growth area, and that was those boundary adjustments that were referred to in there. Those have all been made. If you refer down to section 7, which is at the bottom of that page, it talks about the topic attachment of territory in the village growth area of town to the village. And in that area, there were some questions at the working meeting by certain board members. I did discuss this with Council for Bristol as well as with staff members. I crafted some proposed language here, and we can talk about that language. It's important to note that with respect to this specific language, although the town of Bristol's council was given notice of this document on Friday, I don't have a sense as to whether there's an agreement or disagreement with respect to this language. But what we've done there is say in section 7.2, it says that a landowner who wishes to have land be attached into the village must file a petition with the town. And then the town board, the town of Bristol board, would have to vote up or down on whether or not they agree that that land ought to move from the town of Bristol into the village of Pleasant Prairie. If the town said no, it's over, there is no change. If the town said yes, it would then go to, the next step in the process would be the town and the village would sit down and they would try to enter into a revenue, accomplishing the attachment on what's called a revenue neutral basis. There are lots of complicated future eventualities that might happen in that situation. But a point was made at the working meeting that certain village board members